Maverick Physical Therapy, welcome back to episode 2 for the pitching mechanics of Transformational Zone 1B. In episode number 1, we hashed out the biomechanics of TZ1B. In previous episodes, we've gone after TZ1A. Today, to get right to the point, we're going to go after a few exercises that I love in terms of loading everything from the top down and the bottom up to be more efficient with TZ1B as we transition and transform our body to another transformational zone as we head towards home plate before we release our ball. So a very basic and simple thing that I'll use, a wooden dowel. Use a PVC pipe, golf club, or a baseball bat, which would be more readily maybe handy and accessible to you. What we'll do is I'll get my athletes into this TZ1B position. And I'm going to go down, I'm going to go glove side arm, thumb kind of down right here. And I'm going to go back, midline of the body, and maybe even a little bit further back right here. And so what I like to do, I'll go a lot on this. A lot of my focus will be spent based on the individual, of course, but a lot of times the hip as well as scapulothoracic and thoracic spine. So I'll kind of pinpoint a few drivers with these progressive oscillations that we'll use. We'll use the progressive oscillations to go to end range to provide more proprioceptive feedback via the stretch, compression, and the tension to that afferent, that sensory feedback that we get, but as a way to get in there and break up those restrictions and adhesions as well. It's great for the hip capsule, all that connective tissue in the hip, as well as thoracic spine, scapulothoracic, and glenohumeral joint. So in TZ1B right here, what we are doing is with that glove side arm, we're driving what we would call that created relative internal rotation of the right hip. And with the glove side arm being up, it's helping to load this side bend of the thoracic spine to the right to further help load this right hip into abduction. We almost want to see this curve right here on the right side of the trunk. If we need to bring the arm back a little bit, we can. This left side arm, thumb down. We didn't get into a ton in TZ1A. We'll do so here biomechanically of kind of that right shoulder and scapula, starting at the scapula first. If we don't get that right rotation of the thoracic spine via the top-down loader and the crisscross loader of the left upper extremity, that scapula on the right side will not externally rotate. It will not retract. And so what we're doing in this position here, the pelvis is now being driven kind of anterior. We get this anterior rotation with this lateral translation. Anterior rotation with this lateral translation, and because we get that anterior rotation, we get more extension, and because we get that side bend right and that rotation right out of sync, we will then get this posterior rotation of the right scapula as well to further our load with the extension of the thoracic spine. So we need both for that to occur. We need that internal rotation, we need that abduction of the right hip, as well as kind of that relative kind of extension right there. So in this position right here again, I'll take my athlete and I'll have them, my thrower, and I'll have them just kind of oscillate kind of towards home plate. And right now, say if I want to focus on the hip, I'm working on just a short little translation kind of to the left, and then I'm going after a little side bend. Left arm is going to help side bend me to the right and rotate me to the right. So we get this, although we get this internal rotation right here of the right hip, and although the pelvis is being rotated to the left, it's relatively speaking rotating to the right because of this left rotation of the femur, if that makes sense. So it's about position and motion right here. And so the position is that it's rotated left, but motion wise it's actually rotating right because the femur is rotating the left. further and faster. Back to that car analogy on the highway. And so with that being said, we get this in-sync loading. I would say we get this in-sync loading of because pelvic girdle and shoulder girdle are then, relatively speaking, rotating in the same direction, which is then going to change as the pelvis now starts to really unwind out of sync with the shoulder girdle and thoracic spine into TZ1C. So TZ1B, I'm right here, I can hold an end range and I can oscillate that scap on the right side, my throwing shoulder, as well as my glove side arm. And so I'm just kind of driving it out and towards you a little bit as I'm kind of translating my hips to the left, getting that good extension, and kind of keeping the left backside of my butt right there, almost like the hitter is almost able to see kind of that yet. I don't want to unwind in this position too early. So I'll use also, you can use any kind of fencing to kind of hang on to with your arm, anything that gives you a little guidance right there. So what we'll do to transition kind of through that, I love to take advantage of a little resistance, and we'll go through some other sequences in a second as well. So for my TZ1B positioning, I'll get into TZ1B, I'll assume the position, and I'll use this teeter-totter-like effect of this row and this press in a variety of positions to help, again, load the right scapula, load the thoracic spine, as well as load the right hip. And so at first, just giving myself a little oscillation, a little row with the right arm, a little almost just kind of press in the sagittal plane / transverse with this right kind of almost anterior lateral press. And now I'll go with that. But now I'm going to add more frontal plane with this left upper extremity to drive yet more right side bend of the thoracic spine. So I'm going after that row with the right arm, that left upper extremity, driving my side bend to the right. I can also pre-position my trunk a little bit more in the transverse plane to give me a little bit more of that kind of out of sync kind of loading right here. So what I'll do, I'll pre-position myself a little bit more sagittal and go a little more transverse, and then a little more frontal. So need to make sure I preset that rotation a little bit more. What we'll transition to next, so I love the oscillations again. What we're going to transition into next is this lunge kind of matrix, transitioning through TZ1A to give us that TZ1B kind of stick point with some graded oscillations. So you can, for sure, if you'd like to, I'll use one of these little med balls. You can, for sure, when it comes to this, use one small thing to kind of get yourself started with, such as here to here. Move that guy out of the way. So we're going to go here, boom, boom. So I'll go with the posterior lunge to really kind of teeter-totter things to get that anterior rotation of the pelvis, so I can get more posterior rotation to more anterior again. It's all about the teeter-totter, stretch, compression, and tension, all the proprioceptive feedback. So I've got this nice top-down load, boom, TZ1A, separate my arms, TZ1B, and I add my progressive oscillation. If I want to get a bigger whine headed into TZ1A to make better loadability of my TZ1B, still set here, I'll go with this posterior medial lunge. I'll come on up, TZ1A, and then the TZ1B. I will then, to speed up the stretch, compression, and the tension of TZ1A, I'll go with a posterior lateral lunge. Boom, TZ1A, TZ1B. If I want to add a little more frontal plane to kind of over-exaggerate it, again, you do not get more specific than throwing a baseball in your sport. We're by no means trying to make this as what we call baseball specific as possible. We're making it as movement specific as possible within the realms of playing a sport, such as throwing an object such as baseball. Throwing an object is synonymous with what all human beings have been expected to be able to do since the beginning of time to survive. And we're just taking the biomechanics of that and adding some ways to load that for you. What I also love doing in these positions right